I just like to, smoke a joint every now and then.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
You dick!
Welcome to Vote Pro Podcast, brought to you by VoteProPot.com. All right, everybody, hello again, and welcome to episode 13 of Vote Pro Podcast. And we've got, as usual, a lot of news to catch you up on. And we're going to start with, last week, we had the news that Canada had legalized cannabis nationwide. And now Andrew has a little follow-up story on that one. What do you got, Andrew?
Well, as it turns out, after last Wednesday, cannabis became legal nationally in Canada. And it only took a few days before they're practically sold out of weed.
What?
Apparently they did.
The country has run out of weed?
Well, they're running low.
Okay.
In certain areas, I think, are more drier than others.
In 5 days.
But
damn, that was quick.
Apparently, what we thought was a cloud storm was just pot smoke.
Yeah. Hurricane Justin.
Hurricane Mary Jane. As it turns out, the first day they did over $2 million in sales, or nationally, which doesn't sound like much, but for the first day out of the gate for new industry, that's pretty good. Oh, excuse me, it was $6 million.
In the first day?
Yeah, the first day, yeah.
That is pretty. Can you imagine what the United States of America numbers would be?
Oh, my God.
The first day that President Trump, or whoever the president is when this happens, signs legalization nationwide. It will be a volcano. There's a whole lot going on, and we really want to get your feedback on all of this, and we want to hear from you. So please do check us out at VoteProPot.com.
Or send us an email at VoteProPot@gmail.com.
And please like and follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/VoteProPot.
Jay, what's the first one on your docket?
I got a story here about the 5 best U.S. senators on marijuana policy. Now, we got election in 2 weeks, right? Less than 2 weeks now.
That's right. We want to know who to vote for.
That's right. This is out of, now these aren't necessarily running, but in terms of getting policy moved forward, legislation written, these are the guys. According to Forbes, a writer named Chris Crane, this was Dateline yesterday. I'm not going to read the article. I'm just going to read the players and a little blurb about them. Cory Booker, Democrat, New Jersey.
Spartacus.
Yes, right. Senator Booker was first elected in 2013, special election, and then won a campaign for full term in 2014. As a member of the Judiciary Committee, he quickly became a champion of marijuana policy reform, either introducing or sponsoring nearly all the major reform bills considered by Senate. Number 2 is Cory Gardner. And he's a Republican.
We got 2 Corys.
We got 2 Corys in a row. And that's a Republican out of Colorado, of course. Gardner actually opposed marijuana legislation when it was being considered by Colorado voters in 2012. But after it was passed and implemented, he decided it was his responsibility to protect the will of his constituents from federal intervention. I mean, and how often do you hear that from a politician?
Well, I think that's kind of a principled stand.
Well, it is very much so. I mean, he's saying,
I think, right?
These are the people that elected me, and this is what they want, and they elected me, put me here to do their business. So it makes sense.
Isn't that what a democracy is all about?
That's what representative government is. Yeah.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be.
You represent your voters.
Number 3 is Elizabeth Warren, Democrat, Massachusetts. Senator Warren was first elected in 2012 and spoke in favor.
All right, Hiawatha.
That's right, and spoke in favor of the medical marijuana ballot initiative that was also being voted on in Massachusetts that year. The initiative passed, and Warren became a leader on medical marijuana policy in the Senate, advocating for cannabis as a way to help combat the opioid overdose crisis. Number 4 is Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon.
Merkley.
That's right, with an M. Merkley is the most senior member who made it into our top 5. He has been able to use his seniority as well as his position as a member of the powerful Appropriations Committee to fight for major changes in U.S. marijuana policy. Number 5 is Rand Paul, a Republican of Kentucky. Senator Paul, first elected in 2010, is the second most senior member of our top 5, despite representing conservative Kentucky, which doesn't even allow for medical use of cannabis. Paul has a strong libertarian streak and has advocated for reform since long before it was popular. He's following in the footsteps of his father, Ron Paul, who for many years was the only Republican member of the House to sponsor marijuana reform legislation. So there's your top 5.
Well, it's surprising at first when you hear Rand Paul, because he is from a very conservative state. But when you think about it for a second, you say, no, he is very libertarian. He just wants the government out of everybody's lives.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Everybody else is from legalization states. It sounds like Oregon, Colorado. They're all from legalization states, and they're protecting their constituency.
Well, Ron Paul didn't surprise me because he is a libertarian essentially.
Oh, very much so.
So what surprises me is that Kentucky elects him. That's what surprises me.
Yeah.
Well, at last week there was a Maryland normal meeting where the libertarian candidate for governor spoke.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
He's very pro reform.
I don't know of any libertarians that aren't.
How can you call yourself a libertarian and not be for reform?
I don't know.
Well, most libertarians are for legalizing all drugs, to be honest with you. They just don't feel like that's the government's decision to make.
He seemed like a really nice guy. He said they're having a election night party at some firehouse he invited everyone to. Guess we can go watch him lose. Seemed like a super nice guy.
Yeah, it's too bad he's going to lose.
Nice guys always lose.
Well, I mean, he's going up against Uncle Larry. He's going to be hard.
That's right.
Yeah. Or it doesn't matter who he's going up against, really. But you're right. He'll be third.
Well, this is an article about, I'll just read the headline. National Expungement Week cleans up records across the U.S. Basically what it is with certain states that have passed adult use legalization or medical, there is a group called Equity First Alliance that is setting out to help individuals who have a conviction on a cannabis charge to wipe their records clean. The places where this is happening, well, it's being centered in cities, so the people can go to these cities and meet with this group, and they're having events in Athens, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Baltimore, Boston, Chicago, College Park, Maryland, Denver, Detroit, Los Angeles, New Haven, Connecticut, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C.
That's really cool.
It's this week. It involves like 20 organizations under this one umbrella group called the Equity First Alliance. And about 77 million Americans have cannabis convictions on their record.
77 million?
77 million Americans.
Wow. That's amazing.
And according to their campaign website, quote, these convictions can restrict access to housing, employment, education, public assistance, and voting rights long after the sentence has been served.
Right.
So, you do your time, you pay your debt, and you still have a conviction on your record.
For possession.
For simple possession or sale. And you can now get these charges erased. Nothing like a clean slate.
What happens if, like, let's say you get pulled over for DWI and they find a little weed and they drop the charges, and you only get you only go to court for the DWI? I'm asking for a friend.
Of course. Well,
I wonder if I could.
I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV, but that would not count as a conviction. I'm just going to guess.
Tell your friend I'm not loaning him any money and I'm not bailing him out.
Cool. I didn't feel like driving to College Park.
See, the way you know that it counts as a conviction is when you've been convicted.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how that works.
That's how you know.
Here's a headline. Utah lawmaker tries pot ahead of medical marijuana vote. This is from the SeattlePI.com. It's a news story out of Salt Lake City. Don't ask me why it's out of Salt Lake City when it's a Seattle newspaper, but a Utah lawmaker drove to Las Vegas and tried marijuana for the first time ahead of an upcoming vote on a proposition that would legalize its use in his state for individuals with qualifying medical conditions. Salt Lake City TV station KUTV reports Senator Jim Debakis wanted to try marijuana before the vote. Dukakis selected an edible gummy for the test, saying legislators should at least try marijuana before it's up for a vote next month. Dukakis, a Salt Lake City Democrat, said in a Facebook video in front of the dispensary that it's no big deal, unquote. Quote, I wouldn't recommend it as a sheer candy, he added. It's kind of bitter. Many lawmakers have said they don't support Proposition 2, but others have said they would support a medical cannabis compromise that's set to be discussed in a special legislative session. So I thought that was kind of funny. You had to see a picture of this guy. He's like some old white guy with gray hair, kind of chubby. He looks like he's, older than us. And I could just picture this guy walking into his dispensary. He's never touched marijuana in his life. He's probably, 75 years old. So I thought, that.
He probably figures, what the hell,
What do I got to lose?
Not getting any younger.
Well, you got to respect it.
Yeah, you do. I mean, right. He said he had fun. He said, now that I've tried it, I realize, quote him, he says it was no big deal, essentially, that, this ain't heroin, man. I just giggled a little bit. It was got hungry and it was fun.
Well, you can apply that same standard for all kinds of laws, before you vote against prostitution, for example.
Right. Who you hurting, right?
Well, you should try it. Hey, right. It's just a joke, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a joke. We at VoteProPot-Cast do not condone prostitution.
Phil, you sound a little snotty over there, brother. What's going on?
Well, I'm a little under the weather tonight.
Man, you're a trooper.
But I shall live.
I hope you're not looking for hazard pay or something just because you got a little cold, pussy.
Well, I think I should get at least a 10% increase on what I'm getting paid for this.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. Let's give him 20.
All right, 20%.
He gets another 2 beers.
What the hell, double it.
We'll double it. And we appreciate you walking down the hallway from your bedroom.
Hey, anything I could do.
I hope that robe is closed.
Hey, man,
the camera's not working right now.
I got to take one for the team.
All right, what do you got, Phil?
A Canadian producer of medical marijuana products, Aphria, appears headed to the New York Stock Exchange. They have filed a Form 40F that reveals it is intending to list on the New York Stock Exchange. The company will join an exclusive group of Canadian cannabis producers that currently trade on major U.S. exchanges, including Canopy Growth, Kronos Group, Tilray, Aurora Cannabis, and others. And it will begin trading on the New York Stock Exchange with the symbol ACB later this month. So keep an eye on your ticker.
Yeah.
And, see how the stock is doing. I don't know how. Now, we did an article a few weeks back about the cannabis stocks in general, that they are growing, but could be looking at some kind of a bursting bubble at some point. The stock analysts are fearful of that. But that's not stopping Aphria from plugging ahead. So,
well, this is a good stock to invest in, because it's in Canada and we don't have to worry about their federal government closing them down, and they can file their losses off on their taxes. They can do business with banks. So it's a safe investment.
Right, as are some of the other Canadian organizations. I don't know if there are any domestic companies trading on any stock exchanges, but there could be.
Well, there are. And I've got a story here. It says cannabis stocks aren't just plunging. They've already fallen into bear market territory. And this is Forbes. So this week, this is data yesterday, this week was not pretty for pot stocks, man. It says maybe it's just a sign that autumn is here, but marijuana stocks like Tilray, which you just mentioned, and Aurora Cannabis have suddenly turned from green to red. Key stocks in the budding cannabis sector have lost more than 20% in the past week, a figure that is typically used to measure a bear market. The biggest exchanges, like there's one called Alternative Harvest ETF, it's down 10%. And the gist of the story here is the question Kevin Kelleher is asking from Forbes is, why is this happening now? So he's gone through and analyzed a little bit. I won't bore you with the numbers because I don't know what they mean anyway. But essentially, he's saying the bubble that we talked about a couple weeks ago is at least shivering a little bit, if not bursting. And that's because a lot of the speculators are actually pulling out because of legality, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Their feeling is these stocks before legalization are going to ramp up with speculators. But once it hits it, a lot of the speculators are going to jump out and just take their cash because there's so much fear about, the federal government coming in or anything that could happen, an administration or, a Sessions or somebody decided to buckle down because they didn't like the way things are going. So anyway, he thinks that's a big part of why they pulled out.
So it's profit taking. They make some money in the stock and they want to get out while they're still ahead. Yeah,
that's what these day traders and speculators do. And he said a lot of those were buying into this stuff because they knew it was going to, in a year from last January or a little before that, they knew that it was going to just skyrocket. But at some point, you got to take your profits and get the hell out, and that's what's happening, I think.
You know what I see in this industry is so many people get excited about it, and they invest in it, and they're just investing too early. Some people are opening businesses, and it's just not. The industry is going there, but the business isn't there yet.
I think you're absolutely right.
That's what the stock market is.
People got all excited about buying stocks, and this price went up. Then all of a sudden they realize, we're excited about the stock, but these companies aren't going to be making any money anytime soon.
Yeah.
But it's mostly big investors and hedge funds and stuff. They're the ones that, they have a certain portion of their portfolio they gamble with essentially. And so this is one of this, stock groups that they gambled in the last 10 months, but they're not stupid. If they make that kind of profit in a year or year and a half on a sector, they're going to jump the hell out, take the profits and go to real estate or go somewhere else that's doing the same thing.
That's exactly what Andrew is kind of alluding to, is that when these companies are kind of mature so that they have a kind of a strong foundation, you'll get more incremental growth in the stock prices as opposed to, this wild upswings. I think, Andrew, you're right. The time is just not ripe for these companies for all the reasons we said.
Yeah, at least not here in the U.S.
A lot of people that put a lot of money into some of these businesses, and they're just not making the profits yet. And in America, you can't write your losses off and your losses off on your taxes
because it's
and you got to whatever sales, and you got to pay. You're responsible for all the sales tax, even if you didn't make any money.
Right?
So it's and also Canada just opened up. I think a lot of these smart investors probably going, I'm going to transfer my money into Canadian companies. But that being said, I also read an article that said, this cannabis industry, once it opens up nationally, some are predicting it's going to be a $500 billion a year industry nationally.
Wow.
Now, that's a lot of money.
That's unbelievable.
And, at some point. So here's switching to medical news. How good is, we know how good cannabis and CBD and even whole plant cannabis is with treating various forms of epilepsy. How good is it at treating inflammation? And there's a whole class of diseases and conditions that are marked by inflammation, swelling, redness, things like arthritis and irritable bowel and other inflammation diseases. Well, a pair of high-profile Stanford scientists, according to 420intel.com, want to use marijuana to treat this entire class of inflammatory inflammation diseases. This past week, scientists Jonathan Rothbard and Lawrence Steinman, both of whom have decades of experience at Stanford University Medical School and have previously founded drug companies, launched a new medical company aimed at developing CBD-based therapies for conditions like arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, and multiple sclerosis, which I did not know was a disease of inflammation, but apparently it is. The common hallmark of all these conditions is that they are inflammatory or diseases in which the body's normal protective response to external threats like infection just goes out of control. The company called Catexo Pharmaceuticals, the new private equity-backed company based in Toronto, Canada, surprise, surprise, but maintains a U.S. subsidiary in Silicon Valley, is part of a bigger trend, a handful of these pharmaceutical startups, some supported by larger companies, some not, where the legal framework for marijuana is much clearer, as opposed to, the pot stocks we were talking about, which I suppose deal more in adult use.
That's really interesting.
But the goal is to develop the first CBD-based drugs to treat inflammatory conditions.
That's amazing.
What they need to do is they're going to do the research and find what strains are most effective.
You're talking about a small startup company here I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's these two scientists from Stanford. The problem is that most of the existing research looks at the effects of the whole plant. In order to identify how CBD affects these conditions, they want to study it in isolation. Like they did, we talked about that epilepsy drug, Epidiolex.
Right. Interesting.
And that's what Rothbard and Steinman want to do. So I think they're getting backing, from a private equity firm, but also with larger pharmaceutical companies, but they're kind of taking this upon themselves, it sounds like. So, good luck. I hope there's a whole range of diseases that potentially could be treated with cannabis.
It's fantastic. It's kind of like what Andrew was talking about, I think last week, about these, pharmaceutical companies kind of standing back and waiting, watching smaller independent companies develop new drugs with this stuff, and then they'll jump in with their trillions.
Let them take the risk.
Yeah, why take the risk? And
you think that's what it is? Let them, yeah.
Let them take the risk. Let them do a lot of the hard work, and then
swoop in and buy them out.
Right. Yeah. That's all they're going to do, and they'll save themselves years. And now Pepsi is announced that they're looking to get in.
Oh yeah, and they're spending literally. I think they said
with cannabis drinks.
Yeah, I think it's $1 billion they're investing in developing a new line.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed, like over the years, I saw some big companies investing money in that, but they were like, they put $10 million here, $20 million here. I'm going, that's not big investments. These companies could put out so much more money. But now you're starting to see $100 investments, $1 billion investments.
Yeah, I know.
The gates have opened. The floodgates are. Get your surfboards out. The wave's coming.
For a company like the Cokes and the Pepsis, Philip Morris, these guys are sinking, like you said, hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion into this. That tells you something, that they know that this is going to be like an article we did, I think, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. This is going to be the next huge, business market.
Well, it's a risk, but that's what entrepreneurs do. They risk. But it's a good risk, I think, and they seem to think it is too. Yeah. So,
well, it's becoming less risky.
I hope, yeah.
And also, I think a lot of the big money is realizing that the time is approaching where they're going to have to strike, and they're all positioning themselves to maximize their investment.
Like Pepsi is the example you brought up. The spokesperson in an article I read, an interview, said, they're spending this money because they're 100% confident this is going to be the next huge food market, kind of breakthrough market. And they want, like you said, they want to be in position. They want to be set up and ready to go. So they're going to start creating products and start marketing them in Canada and have them ready.
Well, like we were talking about stocks earlier, and I was going to make the point, I forgot. Some people are saying that now, one day the market's going to be, $500 billion in the United States, and some of these companies are going to be big players in it. So there's some companies out there now and it's going to be the equivalent to buying Google stocks at $3 a share.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there's companies out there like that now.
Don't you wish you'd have done that?
Right.
Yep.
Apparently, the Attorney General in Arizona wants to say that hashish is illegal. Attorney General Mark Brenovich posted in court filings that only dried marijuana should be available for medical consumption.
Oh, brother.
The filing suggests that possession of hashish is deemed a crime, and an idea that, if enforced, would have dire consequences on people who use oils, extracts, or any kind of food product made from the plant. Now, Brenovich,
you don't hear much about hashish these days.
Well, it's all, there's so many concentrates out now because hash, butter, shatter, they're all concentrates.
So what is the law, Andrew, in Arizona? What
he says that the law which was voted on.
Say?
It says that medical marijuana it authorizes the use of usable marijuana, which is defined as dried flowers of the marijuana plant and any mixture of or preparation thereof. And he's saying that doesn't cover, that's just dried marijuana. It doesn't cover extracts.
How can he make that argument if it says any preparation thereof? That's pretty wide
he's
open.
just saying, well, that's a preparation of it's a joint or it's or a pipe, I guess.
So this is going to be a court case?
Well, he's making noise. I don't know. Nothing. No court dates have been set. There was a judge who made a ruling and who said that the resin is an extract of the plant. Cannabis is part of the plant, just like sap is part of a tree. So
I see. So the judge ruled against this guy then.
Yeah, against this guy, and the health board said we'll do whatever we're told. And
Phil's right. This will end up in court, obviously, if it hadn't already.
We'll see. Maybe not, but maybe not. But this is just another example of people who oppose reform pushing back.
It's happened. Yeah, it's.
And then an attorney general of a state, that's a big deal for someone to push back, especially something as unreasonable as this.
Yeah.
Now, meanwhile, in Alabama, they say just the opposite. Oh, you can't smoke it. You can only use the extracts.
Right.
That's so weird.
And probably for the exact same reason. And meanwhile, Andrew, another state nearby, Colorado, is actually setting up what one might call cannabis safe spaces.
Apparently in Colorado, there's a group of people that are trying to get laws passed that will establish licenses for people to have like coffee shops or be able to serve marijuana to customers for consumption on premise. But there's a big fight back from all the city officials. So it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon.
What are the laws now with regard to smoke? I mean, can you go?
Well, they're saying you can't smoke where people are worried about secondhand smoke, which of course they don't want to smoke joints inside. But a lot of bars have outdoor patios and bars outside where people go smoke cigarettes and drink and have a cocktail.
So that's very common. You can't smoke a joint there? And that's what I'm asking. Can you smoke a joint next to somebody smoking a cigarette in the same area?
And having a beer.
Right.
And having a beer. Yeah, they don't want to allow that. I'm thinking maybe some of these like VFWs and Elks Clubs and Moose, which are all privately owned. They're private clubs, private clubs. Why can't they say, you can come to, they could start allowing their members to have a smoking area where you can go and they can smoke weed there. I mean, some of them do it probably already, but if they could be allowed to do it legally, it would help that industry because a lot of those private clubs are hurting because their memberships are dying off.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea to have private smoking clubs.
That would infuse new life into those groups, that's for sure.
Yeah. I think of the Flintstones.
I'll tell you, if one of your buddies called you up and said, hey, we're going to the Elks Club for a cannabis tasting. You want to go along?
I'm in.
This really doesn't have that much to do with cannabis, but it does have to do with voting. There's a local restaurant in the Washington, D.C. area, a local restaurant chain called Kava. And they employ 1,600 people, and the owner...
Love Kava.
Oh, yeah. We've celebrated our birthdays there. We've had some...
it's good food.
In fact, this podcast started off...
Great food.
Because the three of us would meet every month for dinner, and just the conversations got to the point where it was like, we should record this.
That's true.
But anyway, the owner, Ted Xenochryssos... I'm Greek, and I'm not even sure if that's right.
It's Greek to me.
He grew up. His mother was a waitress at a diner in Maryland, and working days and nights. And a lot of times she didn't have the ability to the time to vote. So being a good guy, this guy, he's paying his employees to go vote. They can get
nice.
They can be late for work for 2 hours and get paid for the 2 hours and go to vote.
That's great. That's a great idea. More people should.
He's helping them get. And he's also helping them get rides to the polls.
Yep.
I'm just saying that's a good thing, and more employers should do whatever they can to help their staff be politically engaged.
I think we should support this establishment.
Yeah,
I think we
absolutely.
should go there and celebrate with a meal and some ouzo.
Yeah, and folks, if you go to VoteProPot.com, we've got a bunch of information on our website about taking action, including how to register, how to vote, for that matter. So you might want to check it out.
Now is a good time. A lot of states now, early voting has started. I don't know about you guys, but I already voted.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
I got my absentee ballot, and I took my time. I went through all the ballot initiatives and figured out exactly, because some of that stuff, the day of voting, you walk in there and it's some Board of Education thing. I don't have any.
What the hell does this mean?
Just
some bond referendum. Yeah.
Right. And I thought, a wrong vote is not the way to do it. So.
Yeah, against.
Yeah,
against. No,
I'm a libertarian.
That's not really fair.
No,
but I'm encouraging everyone to get out and vote early. Get out and vote. And you do it early. Sometimes you show up and there's no line. It may be too late to get an absentee ballot, but a lot of early polls have already started opening in some states. So please get out. And when you go, knock on your neighbor's door, call your friends, call your family, take them to vote. Take your mother or father, call them. Go to the old folks' home and get a carload of them and take them to the polling.
Great advice, Andrew. That's great.
And when you have an opportunity to cast a vote for a candidate or an initiative where cannabis legal reform is on the ballot, for heaven's sakes, show up and vote. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of VoteProPot-Cast. If so, please do us a favor and go on to Apple Podcasts and leave us a quick message or a rating. Any comments that you can impart will be very much appreciated and, incorporated perhaps into our podcast. And don't forget, check us out and all of our episodes at VoteProPot.com.
You can send us an email at votepropot@gmail.com.
And please like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/VoteProPot.
And as always, we want you to get involved. We know that nothing changes without the involvement and participation of like-minded individuals. So please get informed, get involved, and vote pro pot.
Wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. But here I am in New York City, hiding out in Central Park, getting kidnapped by the police today sometime before dark. But I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. The judge looked down upon me, frowned. He said, "Kid, get on your way. Just don't start out your morning with espresso and a J." I said, "I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day." Hitched on out to Portland, caught a ride up to BC, took the bus over to the neighborhood smoking good old sense media.